Warning: the following podcast contains graphic content that may be disturbing or triggering to some listeners. Discretion is advised. The Papa Tango Delta Sierra podcast is available free of charge thanks to the support of Cracked Armor. Their mission is to raise awareness for PTSD, TBI, and mental health to support those who struggle. By creating an army of warriors who represent the gear, their hope is that it will send the message to others that they are not alone. Go to crackedarmor.com, say hi to Mark Long, read about the story, find some research information about PTSD, and support the cause by buying some gear.
(10-9). Did you say Papa Tango Sierra Delta? 10-4.
There's so much left to do, so many things I wanna say, and I sing. Don't make the change. If it rains every single day, I'll fight to blow it all away.
This is episode 9 of the Papa Tango Sierra Delta podcast. My name is Larry Payton, and I have been diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress. Please share the show. Take the time also to leave ratings or reviews. Let's get the word out there about post-traumatic stress. I want to start off today to once again talk about a show that I volunteered with the Cracked Armor booth. This one was the Ideal Spring Home Show, once again at the Halifax Exhibition Center. I was there with Mark Long and with Scott Evans. Mentioned them before in the podcast, so I won't go into their background again. Before I start talking about the show, I do want to share a pretty cool fact with you. I fucking hate leaving home. I do not like leaving my house. I don't know why. I mean, it's PTSD, I know that, but I just don't seem to ever really care to leave. Now, I'm okay going in the daytime. So when it comes to leaving any time before dinner, I don't want to go, but I have no issue with it. No major aversion. I'll do it. I'm not happy. I'm looking forward to it. I'll try whatever I can to get the hell out of it, but I will go. After dinner, however, comes a completely different thing. I just don't want to go. So bad that if I know I have to go somewhere after dinner, I'll be depressed throughout the entire day. It just sits with me. And I mean majorly depressed. I don't mean a little sad. I mean, I am in the dumps. I was trying to work through this a little bit, trying to figure it out with my psychologist. And she came up with a great thought based on our 2.5 years of working together. She asked, when you were in general duty, what time did your night shift start? And I said, 5 p.m. She said, all of them started at 5 p.m.? I said, yeah, all of them started at 5 p.m. So she asked, how would you feel then if you had a meeting that you had to go to at 5 p.m.? And I started shaking my head and I'm like, no, But you said you don't eat dinner till 6. That's right. But you wouldn't want to go out at 5. What about 4? I'm like, no, I don't really mind. There you go, she said. Do you think maybe this has a connection to the trauma endured on night shifts, working alone, being terrified? It seems to make sense to me, which brings me back to the show. I really hate leaving my house, but I do enjoy spending time with Mark and with Scott. And so, although it's long days at the booth, it's pretty healthy for me to get the hell out and to start interacting with people again. And once again, there were a lot of people that stopped by to buy gear, but a lot to talk, and just to talk. One lady, I recall, was telling us about a traumatic incident she had regarding a kidney transplant and a nurse giving her the wrong medication that ultimately cost her the kidney transplant. It failed. And her fear is that she now was not going to be able to live for a whole lot longer. Her time was limited. Her high school sweetheart was her husband, and he, right behind her back, good man, went out and tested to see if he could be a match. And believe it or not, he was a perfect match. And so he gave up one of his kidneys for his wife. And because of that, she now lives. Very grateful. Very, very nice people. Amazing story. But she's struggling with post-traumatic stress based on an error at the hospital, based on her life potentially being compromised, and everything else that will go along with that. We had another couple stop by the booth, and as most people asked, what's the deal with the returning warrior wrench that Mark Long is starting? So when I explained it, this lady immediately just started crying, just broke down, full out in tears. We brought her in behind one of our banners we had up just so she could shed some tears in peace. But it was obvious that this is a person who was severely struggling with post-traumatic stress and was actually just feeling like someone is doing something about this. Pretty deep. We were speaking with a gentleman who was deployed to Afghanistan, and we were talking about some issues that we both experienced, and he began to tremble. You could see he was being triggered. Things were just very, very emotional. One of the biggest things that stood out to us, though, and Scott and I really noticed this, was a number of other police officers that looked at the booth and kept walking. And we knew they were police officers. Scott either knew them personally or recognized them, as I did. They would quickly look, and they would turn their head and keep moving. Now, I can't say it meant this with every one of them, and maybe I'm completely wrong, but that certainly seems to be a sign that you're experiencing some issues and you just are not dealing with them. You are trying to shove them under the rug. You're trying to stay the hell away from it. Keep PTSD the fuck away from me. If you're one of those police officers that walk by, that's not going to help, buddy. It's not going to help at all. You're going to need to accept the fact that you have experienced a lot of trauma, which may very well result in post-traumatic stress. And pretending it doesn't exist is only going to make it so much worse and so much uglier when it finally raises its head. That's the way it was for me. There was lots of interest in the podcast, which was great. I had something like 150 newsletter sheets printed off about it, and they were gone. People started scanning the QR code to be able to follow. So hopefully there's a bunch of new listeners and a bunch of new people that want to be involved and want to stand up and speak out. On Saturday, while at the show, Mark received a phone call. Cool. He gets lots of calls. Never thought anything of it. Until about 10 minutes later, he passed the phone to me. I had no idea why in the hell he did that. So, of course, I just said, hello. The gentleman on the other line introduced himself and said he'd been recently diagnosed with PTSD. He said that he'd seen it all like others before him, that he's always been a hardworking high achiever, referred to as a keener or a digger, and that ultimately it all took a toll on his health. He said he was at his therapist earlier this week, and his therapist sent him home with homework. Again, at this point, I'm like, okay, sounds cool, man. That's great. No, you don't get it. My homework was to listen to the Papa Tango Sierra Delta podcast. What? Are you in Nova Scotia? He said, no, Northern Ontario. And your therapist told you to listen to the Papa Tango Sierra Delta podcast. He says, yeah. And I have to say, Larry, I've listened to all the episodes so far, and I actually feel a bit better. I don't feel as alone. I feel like other people are experiencing the things I'm experiencing, and it's okay. And I just wanted to thank you for it. I'm still fucking blown away by that. That there's a therapist, a professionally trained therapist in Northern Ontario that referred one of her clients to the Papa Tango Sierra Delta podcast. Unreal. I have no idea how it got to that therapist. I have no idea if other therapists have done this. I was just really mind blown that this actually happened. And I'm still mind blown by it. It was unbelievable. And I'm proud as hell. And I'm happy, not only because of things that I'm saying, but it's what all the guests are saying. It's not my podcast. It's ours. We're trying to help each other. We're trying to be there for each other. Which brings me to one thing that a person had said to me this weekend. She looked at me and said, I have no idea how it is you're struggling with PTSD, and you can be behind that table and talk to everybody. And I said, you're completely wrong. I can easily talk to people who are like me. I don't talk so well to, air quote, normal people. And that's the truth. It seems to be so much easier to converse with another person who's struggling with the injury. I don't know why. I mean, I guess It's just that I feel that that person understands, they get it. I don't have to explain a lot of things, which really kind of throws me off a lot. Like to the point that, and it's just shitty to say, but to the point that it sometimes gets annoying when you're trying to explain certain things and there's a bunch of interruptions and questions and I don't understand and what do you mean by that? And my favorite one, oh fuck, this is my favorite one. You feel depressed? Well, just stop. Holy shit, man, I never thought of that. Fuck, I just have to stop? Woo! But conversing with people who are like me, I just find it so easy to speak with them. It's amazing. I started off by talking about the one cool fact that I hate leaving home. And if you've listened to this podcast before or talked to me before, you'll know I like coming full circle on things. So working back to that, there's all kinds of cool facts about me, some of which I've spoken, some yet to be shared. But one thing I can say is that I wasn't always this way. That wasn't me. I've changed. I know I've changed. I didn't at the time know. So for the past almost 20 years, I didn't know that I was changing. Someone would mention, man, you seem to kind of lose your cool a bit when you get angry. Yeah, I was always like that. Not putting up with shit. But then I look back and I go, yeah, I would lose my cool when I was angry, and I wouldn't put up with shit before. But certainly not like I'm doing now. Completely different. I challenge you to go back and think about you before. Think about how your personality has changed. And then as you're trying to recover, which is what I've been doing since the first week of December, see if you can't work your way back to some of those personality traits you had prior to your traumatic injuries. I just challenge you to do that. Take the time to sit down and think, even if you come up with one that you want to try to go back and reinvigorate, reignite, come back down to that level. I do want to say that I am very grateful the RCMP has given me the time I need to heal, that I've been able to be off since the 1st of December, and there's been no push for me to hurry up and do things. At this point, it just seems that my employer understands and respects my need to get healthy again. It's not about returning to work. It's about returning to life. Let's take a quick break.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into the podcast. If you have experience with post-traumatic stress and would like to join me for an episode, please reach out to me. You can contact me via direct message on Instagram, PTSD_podcast, or you can send me an email at papatangosierradelta@gmail.com. Cheers.
And we are back from the break. Thank you very much for sticking around to listen to the Papa Tango Sierra Delta podcast. The guest on today's show is José Arias. Please tell everyone about you, about your background. Give us the goods on who José Arias is.
So my background is, my parents are from Spain. They were both born and raised from the northern part of Spain, province called Asturias. They immigrated to Canada, I believe in the 70s. From there, my parents lived in Montreal for a few years, where my older brother and sister were born. In the 80s, me and my twin brother were born afterwards in Toronto. Because of that, I was a Habs fan, because my parents moved to Montreal. But so forgive me for those Leaf fans.
That is the end of the show. No, man, no, go ahead.
So I grew up in Toronto. I grew up in public housing, TCHC buildings, Finchton Weston area. Pretty violent, a lot of shootings. The neighborhood I grew up in was called Ardwick Boulevard. Around when I was 8 years old, my dad left when I was young, kind of just picked up and left. Then in that neighborhood, there was a lot of like shootings and drug dealing. A friend of mine was murdered. A lot of things to see as a young kid, right?
Wow, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting because you would see like when I was younger, my sister would bring boyfriends or my brother bring girlfriends, and then there would be shooting and they would like hit the deck, except for us because like where we lived, we weren't concerned because our house was pretty much surrounded by buildings.
Jesus.
So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So we moved out and then kind of, lived in the GTA of Toronto and just kind of went from place to place. From there, I joined the military when I was about 17. I was in the reserves. I was still in high school at the time, but I saw a poster and the teacher asked me what I wanted to do. I was like, that looks like fun. So I was like, I'll do that. I did it with the co-op program. It was great. Got to shoot guns and blow stuff up. I was like, this is amazing. All right,
Yeah,
got credits for it. Then I joined the Toronto Police in 2006 as a court officer. Great job. I learned so much from that position. Then afterwards, I took a leave of absence to go the military to Afghanistan. So we were in Pashtun, in the Kandahar, pretty much Kandahar province, and Pashtun was the area. They made a movie on the road that we lived on called Hyena Road.
Yeah.
It was originally called Route Fosters, but they changed the name to Hyena Road. And then there's a movie on Netflix about it.
Yeah.
It's not a bad movie. It's a Canadian movie, but it's not bad. Seen a lot there. My job over in Afghanistan was the police operational mentoring liaison team. So our job was to mentor the Afghan police. Kind of, these are the trades that we use as police officers, and it's what we do, things like that. Kind of giving them the investigative mindset. Our job there was to basically make sure that road was safe every day. It's about a 10-15 kilometer stretch of road, and there's a lot of IEDs we found, and some found us, but
Wow. Wow.
for the most part, we all made it back safe. It's a couple, we lost some friends, but it happens. That's the game, right?
Wow.
Currently, I'm a police officer in Toronto. Been doing that for 10, 11 years. Great division, great people. I mean, the coworkers are amazing. You learn a lot about the brother sisterhood aspect a lot. What else? I've been practicing jiu-jitsu just under 5 years. It's extremely helpful with mental health. I couldn't, there's some days you deal with people who are just like, you just get so frustrated.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you have to be professional and things like that. So, you try to keep a calm, cool, collected mindset. But then when you go to train jiu-jitsu and you get it out of your system, and it just feels amazing after. Like you forgot everything that even happened. You're like, why was I even bothered by that, right? Kind of thing. Right now, I also do, I'm a breathwork facilitator. It helps a lot too with some people who suffer from trauma. They won't know what it is. They're just suffering. But going through this breathwork session, it's holotropic breathing, and the method is basically you go through a few cycles, and when I take you through a guided meditation, you kind of have an idea of what it is that triggered you to have whatever trauma that you were exposed to as a child, right?
Was it, I mean, this breath work that you're talking about here now, is this something that you got into because it helped you with your PTSD?
It's helped me realize that a lot of people need help with it. I'm trying to figure out, like, I've always been, growing up to like help others. So my mindset came to, I did ayahuasca years ago. And then during this ayahuasca retreat, I did breath work. And the next day, and I was completely shocked at how impactful the breathwork session was. And I realized I need to know this. So I wanted to learn how to do this and basically guide others to do the same. It's not a cure-all, but it's kind of gets you into the path in the right direction of what you need to do to focus on. Just like a gateway of like, here's what your problem is, face it and deal with it and fix it. And then from there, you can start developing and getting better and better and better. Because like studies have shown, like I have a huge fear of heights. There's a few calls where you're dealing with heights, and I had to pull a female off the balcony who was ready to jump. And for at least a few days, I had like sleepless nights. We pulled her off, obviously. We took her to the hospital and everything like that. But I was like, my adrenaline was so high. Like I've been shot at in Afghanistan, things like that. And my adrenaline wasn't even that high for that.
Wow. Yeah.
It was on a Friday, I remember. And then I think it was by Monday, I had like a lot of sleepless nights, just, waking up, cold sweats, thinking, having these nightmares of me accidentally pushing her or me going with her, things like that. And then I said to myself, by the first shift of my next, if by then I'm not fine, I'm going to go seek help. And by Wednesday, I actually had my first decent sleep. And I was like, okay, then I just kept focusing on myself. I'm like, okay, I'll keep an eye on this. This was in 2014, I believe, and I've been fine since.
Okay, good.
That's pretty much it in a nutshell. I'm currently in the neighborhood spot, so my job is to provide resources and things like that to families in need in these high crime areas. So I help in that aspect right now.
That's really cool. Going back to, for lack of a better term, your roots. You know what it's like living in those areas. So, I mean, it's got to give you some gratitude being there to be able to actually have some credential when you speak to people there, as opposed to being some guy who, what the hell do you know? To get back to your time in Afghanistan, that's a lot to deal with. Is there something that stood out there that you feel that's caused your PTSD? What's happened?
Well, the biggest thing I find is coming back from Afghanistan. I served from 2008 to 2009 and Roto 3, but we would meet up for Remembrance Day and things like that. And a lot of the wives would speak to my wife and ask her, like, is your husband suffering from PTSD? And the wife would be like, no, he's fine. Like, how are your husbands, kind of thing? And they talk about how like they're not talking about it. They're completely distancing themselves from them and things like that. And they're just in complete shock. Like, And the wife would come to me and tell me, but I'm like, really? So I kind of talked to the guys about it, and they're, they kind of fluff it off like, oh, I'm fine, don't worry about it, kind of thing. So the wife basically told the other wives, basically saying that my husband talks about it often, which could be the big key component why I don't suffer from any PTSD. At least as of right now, I don't. I've been to a few psychiatrists, spoke to them about it, and they kind of wrote me off like, no, you're in good health and things like that. I'm still going, right, kind of thing.
Let's hold on a second here now. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
So you've been to Afghanistan. You worked
Yes.
the area of Hyena Road. You've dealt with losses. You are now, with Toronto Police Service, working in certainly a rougher, more difficult part of town, trying to be a community officer. And I must be mistaken. I thought you said just then that you don't have PTSD. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. This is phenomenal. All right. This is what we need to get into. How is it that, is there anything in particular? Do you just see yourself as, well, I guess I was a lucky one? Or is there anything in particular that you did during your time in Afghanistan, your time now, that you think has been a help?
I don't know. There could be a lot of factors that I'm like slowly kind of thinking about it. Hyena Road was also known as IED Alley. IEDs, for those who don't know, is improvised explosive device. So bombs, essentially. So bomb alley.
Wow.
And we saw a lot of death there, obviously. But it wasn't like when I would see a body or, we'd be attacked or things like that, I would just rely on my training. And if there was, a body or an incident we deal that, I would kind of treat it as not so much as a person, but as more as like an object.
Okay.
And like with the military, even with the police world, like there's a lot of dark humor that we have.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's just a coping mechanism, right? So those who are listening, if they hear police officers or even people in first responders, like we all kind of have it, and making these like weird, sadistic, dark jokes, it's nothing personal. It's just because they want to get it out of their system. It's a defense mechanism. So that way we don't take it back home to our families, essentially.
Exactly. Right? Subconscious. I think it's a lot of it's subconscious. Yeah, it's not a thought that I want to make fun of this today because I don't want to take it home. It's just what you do to, like you said, as a defense mechanism, as a cope.
Yeah, exactly. We're still going 100% when it comes to helping others. Like we're still not stop doing our job. We're still going to keep going, right? But I just think it's a bit of that. And my wife is big on support. If I say I want to go out with the guys from the military or whatever, she's like, yeah, go ahead, have fun. So I think that's also important too, right? The camaraderie to continue building things like that, and always helping each other out.
Right.
There's a couple of people off my division off PTSD, and I've reached out to them. Hope everything's okay. You want to kind of give them a maintenance check to say, hey, are you good? Or you want to talk? You want to go for a beer, whatever the case is, right? Kind of chat. Right. And they say, I'm good. Everything's good. Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, no worries. All right. Just if you need someone to talk to, I'm here, kind of thing, right? Because at least the worst case scenario you can do to someone who's suffering from PTSD is to leave them alone, right? Because then their mind just starts digging deeper and deeper and deeper. And sometimes you just dig so deep that there's no way out, right?
Right.
There's guys on my tour try to commit suicide twice.
Wow.
And, we've reached out to help him out. He's gotten to drugs, like a lot of heavy drugs and things like that. We've helped him out, took him into our house, things like that. You don't have to pay rent, man. Just whatever it is you need help with, let's fix it, right? Or at least get you on the right path, essentially, right?
That's fantastic,
things
man.
Like that.
Fantastic.
And I just think, seeing or going through whatever it is I went through, I just faced it head on. I think that might have helped not getting any PTSD. I don't know. Like I said, I'm constantly in my head thinking, okay, what could I do better? Or lately, I contribute a lot with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like heavily. Afterwards, whatever stress or nonsense I'm going through my head, whether it's stuff at home or at work, instantly out of my system, like gone. I couldn't believe how effective it was.
Wow.
I was talking to a psychiatrist a while ago saying, I don't know if it's because me being a reservist, I know how to turn it on and off because, you do the weekend thing, you're the soldier for the weekend. And then on Monday, you kind of go back to, whatever job. So I know how to turn it off. So I don't know if that was also a factor that helped me kind of deal with it. So that's where my mindset is going.
Yeah. One of the other things we talked about when we were on the phone was that you have I know you sort of touched on it in terms of your support system with your wife, but you had mentioned that a lot of guys that you served with were not talking, whereas you had a very open line of communication with your wife to be able to get things off your chest. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. During Remembrance Day, things like that, I would just talk about stories about it, right? And just, this is what we did. And she was just in shock. She's like, I can't believe it, like with all the things you've done. And then as I'm talking about it, she'd ask questions here and there, but more just out of curiosity perspective, like most people would ask. But she'd just be super supportive, and she'd just be like, I can't believe you went through all that. And, she'd give me a hug and like, thank you so much. She's like my number one fan when it comes to supporting the troops and things like that. That's why when I tell her, hey, I got to go up north with my army buddies, we're going to, have a weekend getaway kind of thing. And it's just debauchery, basically. Just a lot of stuff to get out of our system. It helps, right? So if it helps them, it's great, right? I mean, we talk to each other every day, send text messages, jokes, things like that.
That's good.
100%, right? So she's a big help. And I think as long as you have a strong base, it would help you guide through whatever it is you're going through, essentially. But I would come home and just, I hardly talk about work. I just, I want to come home to my kids and just hang out with them and act silly with them and things like that. And I guess that helps too, as another factor. I use work to get away from home, and I use home to get away from work.
Oh,
so I think that helps with like turning on and off, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Like, as soon as I get home, I'm not a police officer. I'm a husband / father, right? And then when I get to work, okay, I'm a police officer / friend or neighborhood community officer, things like that. So I think that helps a lot. I think it's the ability to turn it on and off. And I just don't know if I'm kind of storing it and then one day I'll blow up. I don't see it happening that way.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I can't tell in 10 years, 5 years, 20 years from now. But as of right now.
But the reality is, yeah, you're talking to someone though, right? I mean, you still have that open line with your wife, but I mean, you've indicated that you've talked to a psychiatrist before. So you are talking, you're not waiting for that rug to be just pulled out from underneath you.
Yeah. And even like neighbors or people I meet, whether in life or on the job or things like that, they'll talk and they'll find out that I was in Afghanistan. So they'll ask questions and I tell them, listen, ask whatever questions you want. Nothing's too taboo. I get out as my system. I think that helps too, right? At least if they've never served or they're curious, obviously everyone's curious, which is fine. Like people want to know, I'll just tell them. And then at least they have an idea of what we saw and been through. So if and when they go to a call and dealing with someone who has PTSD, then at least they have some sort of idea on how the things that they've suffered from, it might help figure that out. Or they might call me. It's like, hey, any idea what I can do with this person? Kind of go from there, right? So to me, it's just I'm hoping kind of coaching them. So that's why I have no problem talking about it, right? Because at least they can, hopefully one day in the future, they can educate someone or help someone in that process, right?
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk with Jose about the breath work techniques that he's learned and how that can be helpful. And certainly as well about the jiu-jitsu. Take a quick break. This episode of the Papa Tango Sierra Delta podcast is brought to you thanks to the support and financial sponsorship of Cracked Armor. Go to crackedarmor.com, read the story, buy the gear, wear it to send a message to others who are struggling that they're not alone. Also to Willow Tree Farms, care of Jason Sobkowicz, another member who is struggling with PTSD and who updates his Instagram frequently to share his story. You can follow him at jason.sobkowicz. And we're back from the break with José Arias, a retired military vet who has served over on Hyena Road in Afghanistan and currently a community officer with the Toronto Police Service. Jose, welcome back.
Thank you.
Beforehand, we were talking about the breath work, which is absolutely amazing. I mean, anyone who is struggling with PTSD, such as myself, are looking for ways that we can even just mitigate some of the daily struggles. We can talk about some of the longer term stuff like EMDR. However, the breathing really has me interested. Tell us more about that. Tell us about how it is you've learned that, how long you've been practicing that, helping people with it. Give us a background.
I did an ayahuasca retreat a few years ago, and a friend of mine who had suffered from trauma as a kid asked me to join him. He's also an officer. I told him, yeah, sure. Like I said, I'll help out any way I can. So we did this ayahuasca retreat, and I kind of went with the mindset, I'm trying to figure out if I'm suffering any trauma, if it's tucked away, anything like that. And like, obviously I'm not denying PTSD doesn't exist, right? But I'm kind of shocked as like, how come I'm not getting any of it, right? So I've thought of myself as a boat. Do I have any leaks that I'm unaware of, essentially, right?
That's deep. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just kind of to see, how big is this leak? How small? I don't know, right? If there is a leak, all right, let's figure out how to patch it up and fix it, right? So
yeah, because no matter how big or small it is, it's going to sink you eventually. So I mean, exactly. I think that's I love that metaphor. It's a fantastic metaphor.
yeah, so I went with him, and we went for the weekend, and he got mind-blowing self-prophecy of he just became a different person, and just for the better. Like, he was completely changed, and he's just like super happy and joyful, and he's on that path, and he's doing even better now. Like,
Wow.
yeah, and I'm super, super proud of him. Yeah, like he'd tell me, like, right before he'd come to work, he'd be in tears just from suffering all the stuff he has as a kid. And then as soon as he come into work, punch in, he put that mask on, and then, be Jermaine, right? That everyone would know, right?
Wow.
But then now it's just like he's a different person. So my ayahuasca experience, I didn't have any visions or anything like that. I just passed out. And then a person who was next to me, he says he's been to the ayahuasca retreat several times. He says there's some days he gets visions and other days he gets nothing. He's like, maybe he just needed rest. I was like, yeah, maybe. Who knows, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The next day we did a breathwork session with a gentleman by the name Gio. He works at Elemental. Great facility, great people there. So he's doing the breathwork session, and he essentially uses the 4 elements as a reference to how to breathe. So there's like the earth breath, there's the water breath, there's the air breath, and the fire breath. Essentially, it goes from long, deep breath. So it's like in, out, and just goes faster and faster, essentially. There's a lot more involved, but that's an idea. After you do about 25, 30 minutes of that session, then from there, about 10, 15 minutes of guided meditation. From there, the breathwork facilitator guides you through this meditation, and it brings you back to whatever it is, trauma that you're going through. And it's not like they're asking you during this guided meditation, can you picture yourself back into the trauma and then talk about it? It's more of a,
Yeah.
it's literally, as you're this guided meditation, it's essentially telling you, just think about when you're younger. Now, younger could be a month ago, 2 years ago, 20 years ago, right?
That's right.
So it's just basically what your own mind will bring you back to. Most people will go back to whatever trauma that is that they had suffered, and then they'll kind of face it head on. And the impact they would get from it, they would come out of this meditation, and they would be like, first time I did it, I was in tears.
Wow.
So my first experience was through this guided meditation. They'd say, picture someone you're super grateful for. And my mom was the first person that came to my mind. And I uncontrollably, I couldn't stop crying. And it wasn't like I'm sad by my mom. I was just tears of joy, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Just all the hard work, raising 4 kids on her own. I was just super happy for all that. And, he says, picture everything you've accomplished in life, and everything, the timeline just popped in my head. And I was just like, wow, like, I'm not bad of a person kind of thing, right?
Like, yeah, exactly.
I couldn't believe how effective it was when realizing, wow, these are the things I'm super grateful for. And I've done a session with my family and friends, some coworkers as well, and they were skeptical at first, and as I was when I first did it. And then afterwards they were like, what the hell just happened? Right? And I said, yeah, I know, I get it.
That's deep. Meditation is interesting because it's just something I've only really experienced over the last 2.5 months or so, yoga and meditation. And the first while with the meditation, I found I just needed to actually learn how to relax. I just couldn't sit there with my eyes closed and chill. I guess it's that hypervigilant shit, you
Yep.
was just, my eyes are open, I got to see what the hell's going on. Is someone there? Someone kind of chuckling at me doing this? Like, what the fuck? But when you finally get to a point where you can actually chill out, and I wouldn't say I've hit a pinnacle with it yet, but I am also to a point where I can relax and I don't find that the time is going long during the meditation, that it's just very peaceful, very relaxing, very introspective, and the time seems like it stood still, but went by kind of quickly as well. You speak to a little bit about meditation from your viewpoint, Jose, just because it's something that, listen, you get a lot of guys in the military, a lot of cops, firefighters, and shit. You be honest, they're all just, tough as nails, right? Like, meditation, Jesus, right? What's the reality? In terms of, from your viewpoint, of how this can actually help members, whether or not they're struggling with PTSD? Because those who don't struggle with it, like you said earlier, doesn't mean that they're never going to struggle with it. However, this can be a big impact if they get a handle on it early. So yeah, tell us about meditation.
Through my experience and a lot of people who practice meditation, what they've told me is that all it is you have to just focus on your breathing. And it's not because we're constantly, too many mind. We're constantly thinking of, like, especially with work, we're thinking about cases. We're going on these calls. I got to catch up on notes. It's constantly, oh, what's going on in my family? I'm getting a text message from the girlfriend or boyfriend. It's just like, what's going on? All it is like, just give 10 minutes max is You can always go longer, obviously, but like all you'll need is all it is just focus your breathing in and out. Just listen to your breath going in and out. You get a moment of clarity, essentially. You have to focus on clearing your head as best as you can. There's those flotation devices kind of lay in water in this tube, and it's just you and your thoughts. At one point, you'll basically be thinking, I can't think of anything else. Good. That's the mindset you're supposed to be at when it comes to meditation. Just clarity, essentially. I did the breathwork session with my nephew. He says he's got ADHD. He says he's constantly in his head thinking about everything else other than whatever conversation or moment he's living in at that point. And then after the breathwork session, he says he could not get into his own head, all because of the guided meditation. He tries meditating prior to that, but I guess the breathwork session helped him kind of go hardcore press into how his meditation should be, essentially. I think that's the big key on how to do proper meditation.
When it comes to that breath work, where can people find some more information on it or learn about it? Any idea?
You can always look at online holotropic breathing, and then depending on where they're at, there might be a facility or someone who a facilitator in their area. You can always message me on Instagram. The Stoic Global is my Instagram account. You can always contact me from there, or contact you and then through me, anything like that.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
holotropic breathing, Elemental is a place located in Vaughan, like just north of Toronto, essentially. Great place. Yeah, Elemental Rhythm is the place where I learned how to do the breath work. I just did the course starting in November of last year and been a facilitator since then. And I've helped so many people. Just at least it helps them on that path that they know they need fixing. So it's like I said, it's not the cure-all. It's not the end result. It's like, and if you need another breathwork session to help figure out, okay, now what path do I need to go on? Just do it, and then it helps. It's just think of it as a maintenance thing, if anything, right?
Listen, we've got to get to the jiu-jitsu part. So I was speaking with Aaron Cho, who is with the El Monte Police Department down in California. He runs a podcast now called 911 Strong. He is big into jiu-jitsu and how that as well helps him, maintain clarity and just get that exercise, that great feeling, that what he needs. What does it do for you, brother?
It does wonders, honestly. I train under Breath MMA, which is also an umbrella for Gracie Toronto. I'll give you an example. So if we're boxing, essentially, we can't really go 100%. If we are going 100%, we have to wear the gear, the headgear,
right,
the gloves, things like that, obviously. But even then, one of us can get hurt. If we're both going 100%, either one of us or both of us are getting injured, essentially. With jiu-jitsu, you can go 100%, and the injuries are minimal. People get injured, obviously, but it's so minimal. If you've had enough, all you have to do is tap or say tap, and then it stops, and then, okay, let's reset. Okay, here's where I made a mistake on, and then again. But it's so in your face because it's so real where it's like a person is trying to choke you out or, break your limb or anything like that, and you can't think of anything else. You have to think of survival. I have to think of this and deal with this problem that's in front of me right now. So you can't think of anything else. You can't think like, oh, I forgot to do the dishes or anything like that. No, this person's doing it right now. And if once you've had enough, then you tap and then you reset and you go again. And it's the jiu-jitsu family everyone is just super friendly. It's so rare to find a bully or anything like that within the jiu-jitsu world. But everyone is just wants to help. Like I've been choked by countless people, but I'm just so it's so addicting that you just like, okay, I screwed up here. Let me fix it. All right, let's go again. And then you keep going, right? And so I'm always giggling and people are like, you're weird. I'm like, I know I'm weird, but whatever, it's fun. So yeah, I love it. I can't get enough of it.
I can't say I've ever heard someone that says they kind of are addicted to being choked. It's dude, that sounds like some.
That's another podcast,
right? That sounds like some 50 Shades of Grey kind of shit, man. Like, oh, that's not what this is about here. What's going on in terms of your time now with Toronto Police Service? How are things going down in the community? How is it you are helping people who are struggling there? Because I mean, let's be pretty straightforward. There's a lot of people who struggle with post-traumatic stress from childhood traumas. How are you reaching out and helping people down in those communities?
What I'm trying to do is trying to change the mindset. So I find growing up in housing, there's a lot of victim mentality. There's nothing wrong with being a victim of something. We're all victims of something, robbery, assaults, anything, right? It happens, absolutely. But once you stay on that course, that victim mentality, that's going nowhere. You're going to dig into your own head and you're going to start getting the mindset of like the world owes me something. And what I try to do is teach them from being a victim to being a victor. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
life,
Yeah.
gave you a bad hand. It sucks. What are you going to do about it? I want the community to basically look back and say, look what I've accomplished as opposed to look what I got away with. I try to teach them like your ancestors years ago were living in caves, hunting saber-toothed tigers for their life. And now we're at the point where it's like, oh, the Nintendo's DS doesn't work anymore or whatever, PlayStation,
It's
right?
true.
It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
just like, listen, you're the cause of your ancestral bloodline, right? They worked so hard to get you where you're at right now. So you have to keep pushing through. We all go through struggles, no doubt, but there's light at the end of the tunnel. I guarantee it. I just tell people, like, you're going to look back and realize, you know what? I went through hell and I'm back. It's like everyone wants that knight in shining armor, but the knight in shining armor is just a sign that he's never had his armor tested. So I'd rather have someone who's like, you know what? Clearly I see some scars and just smile and it's like, yep, I do. And I'm still pushing. I'm trying to push them into that mindset. We all need help. I'm all for it. I'm all for safety nets, but it shouldn't be a hammock, right? Because once you get comfortable with being comfortable, it's game over. You have to learn to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Jocko Willink speaks highly of that. Joe Rogan, things like that. David Goggins, another good guy. Like, they went through hell, but guess what? I'm still pushing through. And it's this mindset, it's you versus the world mindset where, come and get me, I'm here. That's my mindset, at least. And so far, it's worked well for me.
Yeah, well, as a person who you said, I mean, let's go right back to the beginning of that. Your parents immigrated from Spain, that you were raised in housing where there was a lot of shootings. You had a friend who was murdered. You are in the reserves. You go serve in the military in IED Alley. And now you're a Toronto Police Service member. That's a lot on your plate, yet you've managed to keep it quite clean, which is amazing. So, I mean, there's a lot to learn from that.
And I'm still trying to learn from it. I spoke to a psychiatrist years ago. But actually, when I came back from overseas, Toronto Police made me go see a psychiatrist a few times, which is fine. I had no problems with it. I was asking her, I'm like, yeah, it's like I feel like I spoke to my friends and they're suffering a lot from PTSD, but I'm not. And now I'm kind of looking internally, like, is there something wrong with me? Am I like the next Dexter or something? And like, and she kind of chuckled and said, don't think too much into it. I'm like, okay, like, I'm not. I'm just trying to fathom as to like why, and just like, how come I'm seeing things differently? So is it a perspective thing? Is it because I saw it differently? Or, I'm always trying to self-improve, right? So I'm always constantly thinking, how could I have done this better? What was it? Things like that. I guess in jiu-jitsu is the exact same thing. Like, if I tap, it's like, okay, how did this person get me? What did I do wrong? Okay, fix that, change this. And so I think that helps a lot with it. I think that's the biggest key, not just the jiu-jitsu, but just constantly reevaluating yourself. And again, the breath work is exactly that too, because you kind of go in your own mind. It's like, where are my troubles and what are my issues here, right? So I think that could be it.
I think that's a huge takeaway, Jose. I mean, what you're saying is that essentially, personally, what I'm hearing from that is instead of constantly sweeping things under the rug and just hoping it goes away, that was a fucking horrible incident, I don't want to think about it, I don't want to talk about it, your modus operandi throughout your existence has been, okay, let's deal with this now. Let's face this now. And let's make sure that this doesn't get a hold of me or, take me down. Is that fair to say? Yes.
Back to the Afghanistan on my tour, we lost our warrant officer. Warrant officer, for those who don't know, in the military, it's like a staff sergeant in the police world. And our warrant officer, Gaetan Roberge, died December 27, 2008. He came back to Afghanistan from his vacation on December 25th.
Shit.
26th, he came out to our police station. And then 27th, he got hit with an IED. And then that was it. And worst day of my life.
Wow.
I called the girlfriend, well, now wife at the time. And I just broke down. I called her on the sat phone and just broke down. And it was just like, I'm like, he's gone. Like the worst day of my life. And the thing is there's it's not that we couldn't get help, but it's just like, well, we're still here. We have to go back to work now. We still have to work, clean up the mess and deal whatever it is we have to deal with. But then the next day is Monday again. Like every day was Monday there, essentially, right? There's no days off.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, we have to carry on. Like, we still have a job to do. So that slowly got into my mindset. It's like, keep pushing through. And it's that mindset as well. It's like, would Gates was his nickname. Would Gates want me to be down and out the whole time, or does he want me to keep pushing through? He's a big bodybuilder guy, always joking around. I can guarantee it. He'd be like, "What are you doing? Stop sulking. Push through. Keep going." Like, he was a big father figure in my eyes. I just do it to make him proud. Okay, keep going, keep pushing through. So I think that's another thing that helps as well, right?
To this day, that really hasn't, I mean, it stays with you, but it really hasn't brought you down, which is, I mean, that's an amazing thing, because a lot of people, I mean, I don't want to say most people, but that eventually would lead to, I mean, it's such a traumatic event that could very well eventually lead to someone having PTSD. But you've managed, and again, I guess by not sweeping things under the rug, by not compartmentalizing things, by actually trying to deal with it at the moment head on, stay in a conversation with your girlfriend who's now a wife, ensure that constant ability to talk is there. Now you're trying to give back, and you're involved in jiu-jitsu, which also means that when something goes wrong, you need to deal with it immediately and not let it get you down, or you don't allow it to get you down because you're trying to find that fix. I'm trying to piece things together, not just for people now who are struggling with PTSD as some ways that they may be able to mitigate their symptoms, but as well for a lot of rookies that are coming in, whether it be military, firefighting, paramedics, police, nursing, corrections, whatever, that this is something that you need to stay ahead of. And I mean, that's a huge takeaway that I get from you, is this is something you need to stay ahead of, and realize that shitty things, like you said, are going to happen, but you need to deal with it at the time and not let it just sit there and marinate.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Like I said, if you let it marinate, it'll like just dig, and it's a lot harder to get out of that state of mind. I think you have to kind of look at that person in the mirror and just challenge them and said, "You're not going to get me. I'm going to get you." It's you versus your mind, essentially, right? And it's, heart versus brain, and like, which is going to push through. I mean, this just works for me. I mean, there might be other solutions for other people, obviously, but so far, like, someone's watching over me, and if that's the case, keep at it. I don't know if it's because the things that I've gone through, and maybe I've been put on here to basically help others now, continue to help others who help others, essentially, right?
Yeah.
So right now I'm slowly going to that avenue and go from there.
That's fantastic, right? Man. That's fantastic. Jose, before we end off, is there anything else that you would like to add? Anything else you'd like to touch on?
If you're suffering from PTSD, you are not alone. I think the best people to talk to are those who experienced it with you. Get that help you need, obviously, no doubt. But, if it was you and a team or a group of people, or you and someone else who, whatever issues you went through, like, talk to each other. It's extremely important. I can't push that enough. I just, if someone doesn't help you, find someone else, right? And I guarantee you that they're there to help. There's always a solution. You just have to dig deep and go from there. And you can always reach out to me on Instagram. Don't be shy. Honestly, I'm here for an ear, and no problem. Again, it's the Stoic Global. Contact me. Don't be shy. We'll, chat. And I have no problem talking to anyone who needs that help.
Fantastic, Jose. Thank you so very much for your time, brother. Very much appreciated. Reach out to Jose. Reach out to me. If you can't find Jose, reach out to me. Jose, it's been great having you on the show. I really appreciate your time. My name is Larry Payton. I have your 6. Please have mine.
Don't go away. There's so much left to do, so many things I wanna say, and I sing here. Don't make the change. If it rains every single day, I'll fight to blow it all away.
One of the things I like to live by is a popular tale of two wolves. It's an ancient Cherokee legend that teaches us about the ongoing battle between good and evil within ourselves. The story goes something like this. An old Cherokee chief was teaching his young grandson about life. He said to the young boy, "A battle is raging inside me. A terrible fight between two wolves. One wolf represents darkness, fear, anger, envy, sadness, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. The other wolf represents light, love, joy, peace, hope, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. The grandfather continued, the same fight is going on inside you, and inside every other person too. The grandson thought about it for a moment and then asked his grandfather, which wolf wins? The old chief replied, the one you feed. The simple yet powerful story reminds us that we have a choice in what we allow to consume our thoughts and actions. The wolf we choose to feed will determine the kind of person we become. If we feed the wolf of darkness, negative thoughts and emotions will dominate our lives, leading to destructive behavior and negative consequences. On the other hand, if we feed the wolf of light, positive thoughts and emotions will take hold, leading to a life of fulfillment and happiness. And the popular Tale of Two Wolves is a timeless reminder that we are in control of our lives and our thoughts and actions have consequences. We must choose wisely to which wolf we want to feed.